Hey everybody, this is Dream, and today we have a 7-game NBA slate and a 4-game college basketball slate. I'm going to do college after I do the NBA slate, so before I get started, can you guys smash that like and subscribe button? It really does help the channel a lot. I really do appreciate it. Also, shout out to the YouTube members. I really do appreciate you guys as well. Make sure to check out the description below for Discord, and make sure to drop your favorite plays and your top highlight options in the comments below. Let me know what you think about the games today. With that said, let's go ahead and get into the injury report here. So for the Cleveland Cavaliers, we have Mitchell questionable, Porter Jr. and Thompson are out. For the Pistons, Sasser is out. For the Hornets, Ball and Williams are out. For Philadelphia, Embiid, Melton, and Covington are out. For Dallas, Doncic is questionable today. For the Warriors, Wiggins remains out. For the Pacers, we have Nesmith is questionable. For the Pelicans, Daniels is out. For the Kings, Fox is questionable. He missed the last game. And for the Timberwolves, Edwards is questionable. And I've also got to get the Blazers with Ayton is doubtful. Brogdon and Henderson are out. For Memphis, Gigi Jackson is questionable. Jackson Jr., Pippen, Kennard, Rose, Bain, Clark, Morant, and Smart are all likely out. So we got lots of injuries here. They're either doubtful or out. So we got a lot of craziness there. So we'll get into that though. So that's the injury report today. We have a lot more to look at from a fantasy output today. We have a lot of guys I do like. I do have two core plays right now in Anthony Edwards and Vince Williams, and I will talk about them first. So Anthony Edwards is at $8,800. He's currently questionable though with ankle soreness, but he's been playing through it the last few games. And if he and in that stretch, he's been over 44 fantasy points in 10 straight games. That's what he needs to 5x today, so he looks like a really solid option, and he's got a very plus matchup here in Sacramento. I mean, does Sacramento is doing a little bit better defensively, but they're still one of the weaker defensive teams. And as you can see, he's averaged 59 fantasy points against them this season. So he's a great play on the slate, assuming he does end up playing, which I think he will. Looking at Vince Williams for Memphis, he's one of the only steady players for Memphis, as he's got 40 fantasy point upside. He's also going to get a lot of minutes as a result of all the injuries. His price is very viable today as well, so he does draw a lot of potential on this one. I really like him as a pretty decent option here. He is a core play for me so far, but that could change. He's one guy that could get maneuvered in and out, but depending on how the injury report plays out. But right now, he is a top tier play for me. Looking over at the other options on the slate, we're going to start with Jason Tatum. Now, Boston's kind of a tough team today because they have a bunch of guys that kind of, every game is kind of a little bit different and which guys go boom. But Tatum's definitely one guy that can. He is priced up, but he has a high ceiling. But that lower floor does make him a GPP play today. The same goes for Jaylen Brown for Boston as well. Brown is also playing pretty well lately. In fact, since the All-Star break, he's had 3 straight 39 fantasy point games or better. But again, him and Tatum do have to share the ball along with Porzingis, and so that is a concern there. As for Porzingis, he actually has played very well the last couple of games. His upside is a little bit higher than the other guys simply because his price is cheaper, and that gives him a lot of potential in this game, though he is the third option on this team right now. So he definitely draws some good potential, especially against a team that struggles against bigs. So I do like his upside on this one here. But we are going to look at one other guy from this team as well. Actually, no, we're not. I'm sorry. Then we're going to look at Philadelphia here and look at Tyrese Maxey. Maxey, since the All-Star break, has had 4 straight 44 to 50 fantasy point games, which is what we need him to do here to pay off, as he needs 43.5 fantasy points to pay off. He's been playing solid lately, and he's getting all the usage he can handle because of all the injuries to Embiid and others. So he's got a lot of upside in this game, and this should be a very plus matchup, as Charlotte is one of the worst teams defensively, and he has averaged 40 fantasy points against them this season, which in those games he had Embiid, so he didn't do as much. His price is obviously higher than it's been most of the season, but he's in a great spot here. Then we're going to look at Portland as a team here. We're going to start off with Anthony Simmons. Now, with Brogdon out, Simmons does get more usage as a result. His price isn't cheap, though, so he's kind of a GPP play because he has that lower floor. But he's got a high ceiling for this game. He's definitely worth a look, as he's going to get plenty of shot opportunities in this one. and he's had some big games lately. He just carries a little bit of risk. I also like Jeremy Grant, as it looks like Aiton will likely be out, and if that's the case, then Grant's going to have a little bit more of a boost here. He's been playing fairly solid with Simmons on the floor, so I like his upside here. Though he has been a little bit inconsistent. His price is a little bit cheaper though, and he definitely draws some potential today. Then we're going to look at Reith for them as well. With Aiton out, he's definitely going to have an opportunity to get some more minutes. And if we go back and we look at earlier in the year when he was playing 27 to 40 minutes in some games, he had a lot of really solid games in that stretch, and he's only $4,200 today, so he's definitely worth a look. He was very close to being considerable a core play. However, I do want to make sure he does end up drawing a start, and where it looks like his minutes should be. So I think he's a good option on the slate, but he definitely carries some risk here. Um, I think that's everybody other than Memphis. So let's talk about Memphis. So a lot of these guys are either doubtful or out, and then of course we have Gigi Jackson as questionable. Now, if we just look at this lineup overall, you're going to notice that only Vince Williams is $6,100. Everybody else is sub $5,000 for the rest of the players that are going to be available. And so that definitely opens up some value for this team. We're going to start with Sante Aldama. Now, he is very close to being a core play. I really thought about it. The only reason I am not making him a core play right now is because his minutes have been inconsistent lately. But he's going to get a lot of upside here, as he should draw more minutes with Jackson Jr. being out and things like that. So I think he's a viable option and very close to being a core play. He really hasn't eclipsed the 30 fantasy point game in a while, though, since the beginning of the month. So I was a little concerned about that, but he definitely has that upside in the plus matchup here. Then we'll look at Gigi Jackson. Now, he is questionable to play, but if he does draw the start, he will be playing plenty of minutes. The question is if he's in good enough shape to do it, because he's got a right quad contusion. He definitely is a GPP play on this slate, as he has that low floor that he's met the last couple of games. But he's still cheap. Then we'll look at Jordan Goodwin here at point guard. Now, he's on a two-way contract right now. He's played 3 of the past 5 games, which is wildly inconsistent when it comes to that. So we'll have to wait and see to make sure that he does end up drawing the start today. But if he does play, he would play over 25 to 30 minutes, and he should be able to score the 22 fantasy points or 23 fantasy points we need to pay off here as a good value play on the slate. He was very close to being considered a core play as well. Zaire Williams has played pretty well with his minutes lately. He's been up and down, but he's in a similar situation. But he's played 25 minutes in 4 straight games, and in 3 of those he's paid off as the fantasy points that we need today. So he should draw plenty of minutes and have some nice upside here. Then we'll look at LaRue from Memphis as well. Now, he's played in the last 3 games and been at 14 points or better fantasy-wise. If he gets 20 minutes, he'll be a good play on the slate, but he definitely carries that risk because maybe he doesn't get those minutes. But I do think he is a potential option. He's just a kind of a Hail Mary play on this one. And then Trey Jameson for Memphis also in play today, as he's only played a handful of games throughout so far this season, but the last I checked, it looks like he's going to play a couple more minutes the next few games. He did get a start here on the 15th, but with Jackson Jr. ruled out, he should be thrust in the lineup. And he hadn't played in quite a few games, but that's kind of the situation that he gets in when Jackson Jr.'s out. So he looks like he's going to have an opportunity to get 20-plus minutes today. And if that's the case, he would definitely potentially play off here. So with that said, guys, that's what I have for the NBA. Let's move over to college basketball. Now, we have a very strange college basketball slate here, as it is a 4-game slate. We have 2 games that the spreads are 1.5 points, and we have 2 games where they're around 15 points. The first 2 games are the Fairview Marist game and the Dayton Loyola Chicago game. Both these games have a 1.5 point spread. The other 2 games, Fresno Nevada and Air Force UTST, these 2 games have 15 point spreads or 16 point spread respectively. Nevada is favored by 14.5, and then Utah State is favored by 16 on this one against Air Force. So, and 3 of the 4 teams that are favored are the home teams. That's Marist, Nevada, and Utah State. And I will kind of break that down as I go. All 4 games have a total of 136 to 138. So the totals are definitely nice and even. However, obviously Fresno and Air Force are going to be tough teams to roster today with them being in blowout situations. Marist and Fairdale definitely seem like that they have a pretty even matchup here. Though I will add the point that Fairdale won the first matchup by 19 points at Fairdale, but this game is at Marist, so this will give them some potential here. Looking at the Loyola Chicago Dayton game, they have not played yet this season, so do keep that in mind, but it is a tight spread for that one. The Fresno Nevada game, Nevada won the first game at Fresno by about 16 points, 72-57, so they definitely have some, 15 points. They actually have some potential there to do that again, actually a little bit better. And then for Utah State and Air Force, Utah State won the game at Air Force by 28 earlier this season, so I think at home that they're going to have a little bit more upside as well. That's probably the most lopsided game on the slate in general. I think the Nevada game will be a little bit closer, but that is a lopsided game too, presuming that Blackshear plays. As for that, we do have a few injuries here for Marist. Allen is questionable. He didn't play the last game, but because he hurt himself in pre-game warm-ups or something like that. And I can't really find too much information yet to know for sure that he's going to play. But if he's in the starting lineup, he'll be somebody to take into consideration. Looking at Nevada, Blackshear is questionable. For Fresno, Bioki, Andre, and Yop are out. And then for Air Force, Mills is questionable and Green is out. So let's get into the plays that we do like. We're going to go team to team here. So we're going to start with Marist. Now, Marist is playing against Fairfield, and this game should be a pretty tight game. Though I didn't think that Marist had a lot of guys that I really liked. But Collins and Allen are the best two options here. Collins being the most expensive play on this team. He has the good upside, but he scored 33 fantasy points against Fairdale earlier this season, even when they got blasted. So I expect him to have some opportunity here, though he's a little bit overpriced for what I'd like. So he's in play, but he's definitely carrying some risk. Pascarelli, excuse me if I'm butchering your name, he's been very inconsistent and he is scoring dependent. So do keep that in mind. But if he has a good scoring game, he can definitely pay off here, as he does do that occasionally. But if we look at Allen, his price has popped down quite a bit. Well, he hasn't really ever been priced this season, as you can see. This is pretty much the first game. But I would expect, based on his history this season, that his price would have been a little bit higher than this. Obviously, he didn't play the last game, so he definitely carries some risk, but he could be in the starting lineup. And if he is, then he has that 20 fantasy point upside, which we want on this slate, especially in a good matchup here. So for him. Looking over at Fairdale here, I do like quite a few plays from this team, but they're going to be somewhat hard to roster at their prices. Fields is my favorite play. He scored 51 fantasy points in the last matchup between these two teams. He definitely draws some potential today, and this game being on the road does hurt him a little bit, but I do think he has some upside in this matchup, and he's been playing pretty well. He needs 28 fantasy points, and I think he's got a pretty safe floor from that perspective. Looking at Floyd, also for Fairdale, he has got a lower ceiling, but he's got just as good of a floor as Fields does, so he's relatively safe. He only scored 23 fantasy points against Marist earlier this season, but he's got some potential to do it again. Leach is the most expensive play for this team, but he really doesn't have much more upside than Fields does, and so I think Fields is a little bit safer. But you could also just roster all three of these guys and feel pretty comfortable with them. But they do carry, he does carry a little bit of risk being a little bit more expensive, but he has a good ceiling. He did not play well in the first game where he only scored 17 fantasy points against them, but that was early in the year. Then we have two other players to consider too as value plays for this team. One is Goodine. Now Goodine has he scored 27 fantasy points the last time against them, but he is very scoring dependent, so do keep that in mind. He doesn't get a lot of assists and rebounds lately, and so that is a concern, but he has that upside if he can get some points, and he should get plenty of minutes in this one coming off the bench. And then we're also going to look at Peyton Smith. Now, Peyton Smith has been limited in minutes the last few games because he missed a couple games with injuries, and he's been slow to come back. Now, the last game, he finally had a boost where he had 13 minutes, and so I look for him to potentially get back into the role where he's going to play more than 15 minutes. If that's the case, he's definitely got a lot of upside at this minimum price. As you can see throughout the season, he was starting and playing, 25 minutes most games and scoring pretty good fantasy points to boot, and he only needs 12 fantasy points to pay off at this price, and so he's definitely somebody I'd consider on the slate. Moving on to the Loyola Chicago Dayton game, we'll start with Loyola Chicago here. Oopsie. Now they are the home team, and I do think that they have some potential that this game should be tight. I didn't really like a ton of guys on this team, but Watson would be my favorite play, though it is a tougher matchup here. For Loyola, he's played pretty well. He has got a pretty safe floor at around 20 fantasy points, and he's got a good ceiling, and he only needs 24 to pay off here, so he's definitely worth a look here. I do think he carries some risk. There's one other guy that I do like here, and that is Dawson. Now, if you remember the guy that I just mentioned for Fairdale, the Peyton Smith, he's kind of in a similar situation. He had a couple injuries, and he had been playing 25, 30 minutes a game for a while, and then he got hurt, and he missed a couple games, and then he's slowly coming back. Now he's a little bit farther along here, where the last game he played 21 minutes. I expect him to potentially get back in the starting lineup, if not this game, but maybe the next one. But even if he doesn't start this game, he should still get over 20 minutes. And the guy that is starting in his place, which is Edwards, his minutes went down quite a bit the last couple games as he's been ramping up. So I think he's a really interesting option at a near minimum price as well. As for Edwards, I just wanted to mention he's the guy that was starting. And I'll just show you the stats here. He's gone down in minutes game to game since Dawson has been back. So I do like Dawson's potential today. Moving over to Dayton, there's really only one guy that's very viable from Dayton today, and that is Holmes. Holmes has been absolutely phenomenal throughout the season. He's got a pretty safe floor at 35 fantasy points. I expect him to get closer to 40 or 50 in this one. He is extremely expensive and hard to roster, though, but he has that big time upside, and this game he's going to have a lot of opportunity to do well here as they're going to have struggle defensively against him. I do think Santos is in play here, but his floor and ceiling are pretty tight on this game, as in I don't think it'll hurt you if you utilize him, but he's also not somebody that's in a really great situation to pay off here. But he's still a pretty solid play on the slate. He's just a contrarian option. Looking over at the Fresno Nevada game, now this is where it's going to get a little crazier because obviously Nevada is favored to win this game by quite a few points, and they won the first game by quite a few, and this is a home game for Nevada now. But we do have some guys I do like from this team, though they are risky. First would be Jared Lucas. Now he is scoring dependent. I do think he's going to get in the 20 to 30 fantasy point range, which is a little bit lower than we need for his price. And he only had 20 fantasy points the last time he played against Fresno. But I do think he's got some upside here with this game being at home. So he definitely carries a lot of risk, but he's definitely an interesting play. Looking at Trey Coleman, he's another guy that has some really interesting upside today, but he definitely carries a low floor. He is squarely a boom or bust play, but the last 3 games, if that's any indication, he has some potential. However, he only scored 18 fantasy points the last time against them, though that was early in the season. So I do think he's got some potential today, but he definitely carries some risk. And in the $7,000 range players, I definitely would move over to Fairdale a little bit more than with the Nevada, but these guys could definitely be contrarian plays. Same goes for Davidson. He's a little bit overpriced today. He does have a high ceiling, but he's got a low floor, and so that is the concern here. But I do like his upside. He scored 28 fantasy points against Fresno the last time out, and he should get plenty of minutes. It's just a matter of getting the points necessary and the rebounds. If he can get a double-double, he'll definitely pay off here. Blackshear is questionable today. I do kind of feel like he might end up playing this one. I'm not sure if he's going to or not, though, so do keep that in mind as we won't get that information until later. He has, with the injury to his ankle, I'm definitely a little concerned that he would have a kind of a gimpy game, so I'm not sure that he's worth a risk here, but that would definitely keep McIntosh from being a viable option on the slate. Looking over at Fresno, we have 2 guys that have high risk, high reward plays, as obviously they are favored to get blasted in this game. However, they've got a ton of injuries, and that's going to open up some potential value because they're going to be a pretty short bench. In fact, I only think there's going to be 6 guys that will play a lot of minutes for them, one being Hill. Now, he's obviously pretty expensive for this slate. He has a high ceiling and a low floor, but he's been playing decently well. However, this game's on the road, so that is a little bit of concern. He did score 24 fantasy points against them last time, which gives him some utility, but he definitely carries a lot of risk, especially at the price. Pope is the other guy that I do like here for Fresno. He also carries high risk, high reward, but he has a higher ceiling than his price requires, as he only needs 20 fantasy points to pay off here. He also did well against Nevada earlier this season with 27 fantasy points, and he's been able to get some rebounds and assists, though he's not typically that way. He's a little bit more of a scoring dependent player, but he's got some potential in this one, so he's definitely worth a look. However, that risk is pretty high. Moving on to the Utah State Air Force game. We'll start with Air Force this time because they are the underdogs. I really only have one guy that I really think is reason. Well, it's kind of two guys that have some reason, but they're definitely risky. Becker being one. He has a low floor, but he's actually got a high ceiling for this game. However, he did not fare well against Utah State in the first game, but he only played 19 minutes in that one. He is a little inconsistent. He didn't do well last game either, but I do think he has some potential in this one. Looking at Petritas, he is the most expensive player on this team, and he definitely draws some high upside potential, but he definitely carries a lot of risk. So looking at Utah State, this is a team that we could definitely pull some guys from. Osabar is obviously the top overall guy on this team, and he has got as much upside as anybody on the slate. He also scored 51 fantasy points against them the first time that they played. I expect him to have a similar potential here, especially with the way he's played lately with three straight games over 40 fantasy points. He needs 36 to pay off, but and he does have a little bit of a lower floor than other expensive players on the slate, but he's definitely worth a look. Brown for them as well is playing well, and he has some utility here. He's got a pretty safe ceiling, but he is got that lower floor that I don't like because he's had a few sub games, but he's only had a handful of those games throughout the season, and he scored 34 fantasy points against this team last time, though he needs about 32 to pay off here. Uh, Foslev, which, sorry if I'm butchering your name, he is a scoring dependent option for this team today, but he's a decent price and he has 30 fantasy point upside, which is pretty good for his price needing around 22 to 24 fantasy points to pay off. So he's definitely worth a look. Martinez is another guy that I think has some utility, but he definitely carries some risk today. Uh, and he doesn't have a very high floor or high ceiling for the potential that he has. Same goes for Odeji. Sorry for butchering your name too. He definitely has that potential, but he carries a lot of risk with a very low floor and a low ceiling. So with that said, guys, thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below, and have a nice day, guys.